corrupts absolutely. I used to think that's true, but this story questions that. I'm not quite sure anymore. If power corrupts, yes. But absolute power corrupts? In this story, absolute power actually consoles. Let's start with power corrupts. True. Power corrupts. Even from the school playground to the Capitol Hill. Right? In any place, when a person knows he has a leverage, he will use it for his advantage. My son, Ian, 8 years old, came to me and he said he has stress in school. And why? He says, kids call him Chinese eyes. I was like, even at this age? And it wasn't just a single event, it was constantly. So now I need to address it with the teacher and the principal. Even in a playground, if the majority knows they are the majority, they will take advantage of it. Saddam Hussein ruled with iron fist from 1979 to 2003, Iraq. He wasn't born a killer, but once he had the power and no accountability, and he could do whatever he wanted to do, he did do whatever he wanted to do, and he became a killer, and a vain man too. Mark Bourdain did an essay while he was still in power called A Tale of a Tyrant. Interesting facts. He did a 19-volume biography of his life, and all Iraqi officials were mandated to read it. He also produced a 6-episode movie about his life called The Long Days. And he called one of the directors who made 3 of the James Bond movies. So if you have power and you could abuse it, you will abuse it. Power corrupts. And here we see the exact same thing, isn't it? Right? These leaders, they go to Jesus and say, look, if you just tell us plainly who you are, then we will believe you, but you're confusing us. But Jesus goes, all right, I'll tell you, I am. It's not because they were confused that they did not accept him. They go, give us a sign that you are from heaven. Jesus goes, okay, Lazarus, come forth. And they see the sign. They can't deny it, but they still reject him. It wasn't because they didn't understand. It wasn't because they didn't have enough evidence. What is it? Power. They had power. They didn't want to lose power. So they, at this point, when all the evidences have clearly shown that this is a holy man from God with amazing miracle that no one has really ever performed in that way, they are committed to killing him because power corrupts. It's so corruptive, they don't even know their own corruption. I mean, listen to the reasoning. It sounds noble for the people of Israel. You know, because Roman Empire will come, so many people will die. Let just one man die. But you could hear it, right? Were they really worried about the people of Israel? And the Rome comes, what is this mess? You guys, the ones that we appointed, out of here. They didn't want to lose their power. Power corrupts. And so I wonder if many of the people who reject Christ is for that reason. You know, when you go witnessing and you do the best job you can do, I mean, you really explain the gospel. And even if you, like, let's say, do prayers and then prayers answered, there will be some people who will still reject the gospel. And you cannot do anything about it because they, like the leaders, are corrupted by power, or at least the illusion of power. They think they have power. And so they want to hold on to that power. And so they'll reject Christ. Because Christ comes and says, no, you don't have power. I am the Lord over your life. So many people reject. So be ready for that. But here's a more challenging question. I wonder if some of us here have rejected Christ for that same reason. Or you're here, you're worshiping, you're religious, just like these leaders, but you have rejected Christ. Not because you're not convinced, not because it still doesn't make sense, but because you still want to retain your own power. You don't want Christ to tell you anything in your life. You don't want Christ to tell you how to run your business, or what career to choose, what friends to be with, or how you live your sexual life. No, you don't want that. You want Christ to stay right here on Sunday and help you to stay the same. Forgiveness is abuse, isn't it? Forgive me so I can stay the same, so I can continue on with my sin. How many of us here are rejecting Christ? and just being religious because our sense of power. We think we have power, and we want to hold on to that power, even if it is an illusion. And so we reject Christ. Aldous Huxley, I've quoted this before to you, right? The philosopher, talking about the meaninglessness of the world, he's not just exclusively interested in the pure metaphysics, but actually he's interested in it because he doesn't want a reason. In other words, if the world doesn't have a meaning, right, then there's no reason for him to change his lifestyle. The meaningless world allows him to do whatever he wants, and for his friends to use all political power to his own advantage. There's a philosopher being very honest with us. We reject Christ because of power, and we want to hold on to it. Power corrupts, no question about it. But what about it? Absolute power. Does absolute power corrupt? Here, it is all about absolute power, isn't it? Right? What is the enemy that no emperor can defeat? What is the enemy no army cannot conquer? Death. Death defeats anything and everything in the world. And here is Jesus, and Jesus defeats death. This story is about power. Remember the first miracle? The first miracle in John is changing water into wine. Jesus was very quiet about it, right? It happened behind the kitchen. He didn't tell everybody. He didn't go, I see you're running out of wine. Watch me turning water into wine. Ta-da! You like it? No, he's like quiet. Few people know. In fact, the people who are drinking it and now they're getting a little tipsy, they're like, whoa, to the host, you brought the best wine. They didn't even know the miracle happened. But here, this is public. This is public. He goes to Bethany when the mourners have crowded the house. He wants all the crowd to follow him to the tomb. He wants everyone to be out. Everyone in the Bethany. He doesn't want a mom in the house cleaning. He doesn't want a kid studying in the synagogue. He said, everybody come out. Listen to the commotion. Follow the river and cry. Come out. I want every one of you to see what's going to happen. He comes to the tomb. And a hush falls to the crowd. And the crowd is expecting something, and he wants that. John chapter 11, verse 41. So they rolled the stone aside. And Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me. Roll the stone. Open the curtain. I want everyone to know what's happening. I want everyone to see this is a display of power. And not just any power, but absolute power. Because Lazarus is dead. 4 days, right? Dead. Right? Now, there are stories where the prophets like Elijah, they raise people from the dead, but it usually happens right after, right? And they die, he goes, prays. And there's a Jewish theology, like the spirit doesn't fully leave, and it's lingering, and so he's calling back. So there's power in that, but that person is not really dead. When's the point when the person is really dead? Right? Because even in those times, like even today, right? We might say medically the person is dead, and we think it's dead, but it might not be, and there's some reason, some other stuff that we cannot see, and they come back. For them, Jewish 3 days, 4 days was a time when you can say that person is dead. What's the mark? The smell. Right? A person who's really not dead but looks dead doesn't smell. But if you're dead, you rot. You rot. And that was a sign. That's why don't roll away the stone. It stinks. It's rotting. That's to say, this person is dead beyond any power of any prophets. Roll away the stone. And he goes, Lazarus, come forth. And he uses words. He doesn't use any hands, no rubbing of the body. Words. Just like God, in the beginning, used words to create world. So here he is, just commanding the dead thing the rotting body, and it comes back to life. This is absolute power. He just punched death on the nose. The amazing thing, though, is this. In this story, about the display of the absolute power of Christ is also the display of Christ's vulnerability. How Christ can be so sensitive. The most powerful being is also the most sensitive being. You guys all know this Bible verse. Jesus wept. You know this because you use it. When you went to the retreat and you had to memorize Bible verses for lunch, Jesus wept. I'm done. Give me my lunch. And we use it to eat lunch. But there's something about that simple Bible verse that tells us about the humanity of Jesus. I want us to read it within this story. John 11:31-36. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep, so they followed her there. So this is when Mary hears that Jesus is here. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. He's a powerful man who feels a lot of emotions, even anger. And when you think about it, even anger, you have to be vulnerable. Where have you put him? He asked them. They told him, Lord, come and see. Then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, see how much he loved him. Jesus cries. The man with absolute power, who is certain that this is going to result in the glory of God, that Lazarus, he's going to come out from that tomb, no question about it, cries. Actually, it sends out of questions, like, why would he cry? Why would he cry? Why would he cry? Right? Many reasons. He could have cried. Part of it is, I think, human beings, we empathize naturally, right? When we see something, actually our brain have similar interactions in our neuron interactions. And so when people cry, if you're vulnerable and empathetic, you tend to cry. Right? I remember one friend, we were in a retreat, and the guy was crying. So I asked him, why are you crying? He goes, I don't know, but everybody else is crying. It just happens naturally. Could it be that he was just crying because everybody's crying? Could it be that he was crying because he saw how much, although this miracle was going to happen, how much it was hurting her? And he was feeling it? He could have cried about the pain of death, just in abstract form, right? That death is still walking in this earth. But the point is that he did break down and cried. Now, I don't think this is the only tender moment in this story. Here he is just breaking down before Mary, who is crying. But even his dialogue with Martha, now, again, if you know the story, you're like, Martha, it sounds like he's just doing theological debate with Martha. Martha says these things about Jesus, you are the resurrection of the future, and he goes, no, I'm the resurrection of the now, and he's trying to correct, and it's like, why are you getting a theological argument? I mean, her brother just asked. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. John 11:21-27. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. So both of them feel the same thing, like they told him in advance. They just saw him heal the person born blind, so he could have done this. And so there is this resentment. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus told her, your brother will rise again. Do you notice what is happening here? Jesus is speaking her language. Mary is crying, so Jesus cries with Mary. Martha deals with this pain in a different way. She is, it's so consistent with her. She likes to not to be so emotional, but indirectly use reason, theology, and religion to deal with it. So she is pumping up hope for herself, right? Even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. He says, your brother. See, Jesus is not entering into an argument for argument's sake. Your brother will rise again. Her pain is not whether Christ will resurrect later or now. Her pain is her brother is dead. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. Yes, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. Just told her, I am the resurrection, the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Do you hear that? Again, it's not making a theological argument. Like, even after dying. I'm talking about now, your brother. And everyone who lives in me, believes in me, will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? Not what you have heard, not what you're repeating, not the theology that you've memorized. Do you believe this, Martha? Yes, Lord, I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who is coming to the world from God. Jesus Christ is so vulnerable, it makes him sensitive to the people that come to him. And he meets them where they are. He responds to their language. See, if he cried with Martha, Martha would be freaking out. If he was talking theology with Mary, Mary would be like, but he cries with the one who's crying and is conversing with the one who needs to talk things out. And Jesus is amazingly sensitive because he's amazingly vulnerable. Power corrupts, but absolute power consoles. Do you know why? Because human power is an illusion. And anyone who has the power knows that. They know that their hold on it is tenuous. And so they will try to do anything and everything to hold on to that power. Uday, son of Saddam Hussein, said to Mark Boudin, the essay, my father's left-hand shirt pocket does not know what's in his right-hand shirt pocket. In other words, powerful Saddam was paranoid. He would have to change bed to bed to bed. He is afraid that he will lose power. Someone will kill him. It's interesting. It's a little bit longer, but I want to quote Mark Boudin. So in observing his life, he has an great insight in why power corrupts. The tyrant's choices are the narrowest of all. His life, the nation, hangs in the balance. He can no longer drift or explore, join or flee. He cannot reinvent himself because so many others depend on him. And he, in turn, must depend on so many others. He stops learning because he's walled in by fortresses and palaces, by generals and ministers who rarely dare to tell him what he doesn't wish to hear. Lies. Power gradually shuts the tyrant off from the world. Everything comes to him second or third hand. He is deceived daily. He becomes ignorant of this land, his people, even his own family. He exists, finally, only to preserve his wealth and power, to build his legacy. Survival becomes his one writing passion. The powerful being, only thing he could think about is survival, so he regulates his diet, tests his food for poison, exercises beyond well-patrolled walls, trusts no one, and tries to control everything. That's what power corrupts. Because he knows that he doesn't have it. So he will lie, deceive, control, manipulate to keep it. But absolute power, it is confident. It is absolute. It cannot be lost. Christ knows he is the Lord of all. And when you know the power cannot be lost, when you're confident in the power, and for him, of course, the absolute power comes from his absolute trust in the Father God, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid? You're not. And so you can be vulnerable. You can be broken. You can break down. You can be sensitive. And yes, you can cry. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying power and weakness, vulnerability is just two opposite things, but somehow we have to hold it together. What I'm saying is they're really the one and same simple truth. Absolute power is vulnerable. True strength can be weak. Only the God on the throne can become the God on the cross. This is why we can come to God. God is so powerful. Why would he care for me? No, God is so powerful. That's why he can care for you. God is so universal, and he's a supreme being. Why would he care for the details of my life? Because he's a supreme being, He has the openness to care for the details of our life. This is who we serve, God. Our God, He's there, and He cries with you over your father's funeral. He cries there with you when your heart is broken. He cries there with you when you just don't know what to do with your children. He's there with you when you don't know when the next rent payment will come. He's there. He knows. He cares. And He cries there with you because He is absolutely powerful. The Almighty. He's all that. And so He cares about all that happens in your life. What comfort. What truth. Take this today. The absolute, powerful God loves you in every details of your life, cares for whatever anxiety right now is running through your mind, and He will be there with you and meet you where you are. But there's another thing too. Christ becomes a model for us. We realize then, to become strong, we need to be weak. To become powerful, we need to be vulnerable. We have a different way of living. We can become more sensitive, more broken, and break down, because this is not the loss of power. This is the final admission that we're in the hand of an awesome and powerful God, and we can rest in that power. A life of vulnerability. Brené Brown, social psychologist, I shared with you about her study. She was looking at people who are whole and healthy, and what surprised her was that all these whole and healthy people, they are vulnerable people. They're honest with their shame. They are people where they can be honest and be their broken self. So you find this amazing paradox, which is really, again, not two things. It really is one simple truth, that to admit one's brokenness is to be whole. But now, usually the study was with women. And there was one time when she was doing this teaching and signing the books, and it was a family that came, and the wife and the 3 daughters, they got the book signed and were leaving, but the husband just stayed there. And then the husband said, what you say is all good, but have you ever studied men? And she goes, I don't study men. And he answered, that's convenient, because we men, we also have the same type of shame, deep shame. And we want to go and be able to talk and be ourselves and be vulnerable. But before you start talking about mean fathers and coaches and bullies and their friends and brothers, think about maybe my wife and the 3 girls that I have, the book that you just signed for. They would rather see me die on the top of my white horse than to see me fall off. For him, even though knowing that a place of vulnerability is where you can be honest and get genuine strength, there was a cultural pressure for men, and especially I'm talking about men, to have it all together. And so even though we speak about vulnerability from the pulpit or even have any teachings out there, but we don't dare. Even Jesus Christ weeping. I've heard some scholars, say, this is really Jesus Christ crying against death, and so make him more heroic. I just think he really broke down. I think he's a full human being, and he saw Mary crying, and he just cried. And if you ask at the moment exactly why you're crying, he will say, I don't know. But this is not right. So I'm going to speak directly at men. Our strength is our ability to be weak. And our power is in our vulnerability. And women, let your men be men. And let's not follow this culture. Because this culture talks about power that corrupts. The power that pretends. The power that protects. The power that always pushes back, pulls away. Because it's a power of illusion. It's an illusory power. You don't have it. But when we say we don't have it and just trust on God, then we have the absolute power. Then we can be free to be vulnerable, to be who we are, to deal with our real life issues. For men to be free, and a woman too. But I bet there's a strange thing that's going on, right? In this sexual equality, we expect women to be more man-like. If you want to make it out in the career, in the real world, you have to be a man, like be strong, like man. Don't be emotional. No. True strength lies in our honesty with all the emotions that we have. Like Jesus. The strongest human being that I know is my grandma. She survived through the Korean War. She survived through the awkwardness and the beating of her husband, and she prayed until her beating husband finally repented and became a Christian. She went in the streets of Seoul, carried sacks of rice over her head, and sold it so her husband could study theology in his 50s. She raised 6 people from poverty and out of poverty. And she is a strong, powerful woman. Even now when I go to New York, she will say, I'll help you carry the luggage upstairs. I said, no, Grandma, you are 88. We're okay. I think I'm stronger than you, okay? And every Sunday I do call, and I call my mom and dad, and if Grandma is there, I say, can I talk to my grandma? And I talk to Grandma, and I don't talk a lot. There's not much that I can say. So I say, Grandma, how are you? I love you. I miss you. Live long. And whenever I say that, she says, oh man, I've lived long enough. I'm praying right now, God, take me away. And when you take me away, take me fast. Don't let me linger in the hospital and be a burden to my kids. Just take me away fast. I'm like, man, she's powerful. She's not even afraid of death. And then I'll pause, and always at the end, she always says, and thank you. And at this point, she's always sobbing. Thank you for wanting to talk to an old woman like me. She is old. She's vulnerable. She is emotional. She is strong. And she doesn't fear death. Power, human power, it corrupts. And it will corrupt you more you reach for it. Absolute power that comes from absolute confidence, trust in the absolute power, it consoles you. God loves you. And from that, you can be the consolation and comfort of the world. Trusting in God. So, when things happen, it's okay to break down. It's okay to cry. And while you're crying, you stand up before that tomb, and you roll away the stone. Let's pray.